Everyone here?
Hintay na lang si Tin, pero wala siya online eh. Kahabol siya. Nagsabi naman siya attention.
Okay, let me set a co-host.
Okay na po yung chat, sir. It's open for all now.
Okay, sige. So let me start. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our training. Happy New Year. In the interest of time, lalo na if we need to finish by 5, let me start. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes po.
Okay, sige. Thank you. So if you have questions, feel free to chat. And also you can interrupt the lecture if you choose and ask your questions. So welcome to our citizen science training. For this afternoon, I will talk about interpreting survey data, which means this is not limited to the citizen science methods that we will cover in the upcoming trainings Mindanao. Okay, so I'll point out some numbers that are going to be very important for you to remember. One of them is this, and this one is easy to remember. The number is 0, and 0 refers to the number of reef sites or stations where during the nationwide assessment of reefs, the National Assessment of Coral Reef Environments Program that surveyed 206 reefs around the Philippines. This is the number of reefs where we found excellent live coral cover as defined by Doctors Gomez and Alcala. We did not find excellent category reefs. And this outcome is actually not surprising because over the decades, you can see that the number of sites surveyed that had more than 75% live coral cover, the number of sites has been declining, and as of present, the number is 0. Okay. It doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means na in a statistically valid random or stratified random sampling scheme, they are so rare na none of them were surveyed in 206 reefs. So many people still use this scale, first presented in the 80s by Doctors Gomez and Alcala. The measure of reef status then is live coral cover, which is a confusing term because they defined it as the sum of soft and hard coral cover. But many other people think na when they see the term live coral cover, they're referring to hard coral cover that's alive. Either way, the scale is an arbitrary scale na quartiles. In the first nationwide assessment from 1976 to 81, the proportion of stations na merong excellent cover ay 5%. The largest I've seen was 5.5%. But like I said, in the latest survey, we did not encounter any of these reefs. So walang kulay green dito sa mapa on the left. We are encouraging people to stop using this scale for many reasons na we can discuss later, but this is not really a good reflection of the status of a reef. The scale is arbitrary. It uses soft coral cover, which contributes little to the growth of the coral reef. And that's just two reasons why we do not encourage the use of this scale. The second number that we want you to remember is this one, 22.8. So this is the estimated hard coral cover in the Philippines during the NACOR, or National Assessment of Coral Reef Environments surveys. Okay. So 22.8, which means on average, since this is an average, ibig sabihin half of our reef survey sites have less than 22.8, and then the other half have more than 22.8. So notice na we talk about hard coral cover na lang, okay? Not live coral cover, not in effect excluding soft coral cover. The 22.8 was based on a stratified random sampling design, meaning kung ang isang bioregion, like for example, the Visayas bioregion, 1 of 6, if 40% of the fringing reefs in the Philippines are in the Visayas, then 40% of our surveys were done in randomly chosen reefs in the Visayas. And because the sampling is random, that is representative of ano ang nangyayari sa buong Pilipinas. Okay. And that's where the 22.8 came from. The third number to remember is 33. This is the average coral cover in Tubataha. And for many things, especially status of reefs, Tubataha is a very good benchmark of sorts. It's one of our largest marine protected areas in the country, and it is likely the best managed coral reef in the Philippines. And the average hard coral cover in Tubataha is 33%, or was 33% as of 2015. Talking about Tubataha, many people think na because it's so well managed, and because it's fairly distant from human influence, yung coral cover sa Tubataha is 100%. That is not true. Like I said, average ay 33. And as evidence of that statement na 100% is a myth, look at this figure from a paper published in 1985 sa International Coral Reef Symposium. And notice na yung pinakamataas na cover nila is 71%. Okay. Another reason why we do not encourage the use of the Gomez and Alcala scale anymore because there is no such thing as 100% coral cover, unless maybe if you are talking about a small section of a reef. So in the place of the Gomez and Alcala scale, we encourage the use of these two scales. One is based on hard coral cover. And notice that the numbers I showed you earlier, okay, the 22.8, the 33, are actually used in this scale. And instead of dividing the whole range of 0 to 100, we used the averages I showed you earlier for the Philippines, which incidentally is also about the average for the Indo-Pacific, based on more than 3,000 surveys around the Pacific Ocean reefs. Average is also 22%. We use those numbers as part of a scale, and this is what we get. Category A, yung riches, more than 44% hard coral cover. And category D is 0 to 22%. Later, you can ask me if you want kung anong relationship na tong lumang scale at bagong scale. We can talk about that as the training proceeds or later on in this session. We want to emphasize, though, that besides using this scale, which is more realistic for current status of reefs, best that you also use a second scale, which refers to the variety, the number of varieties of taxonomic agglomeration units, basically genus growth form combinations. We encourage na you look at the cover of hard corals, but also to look at the variety of corals. Because in many places, you may have category A or B hard coral cover, but often those same reefs are category D in terms of the number of taus. Okay. Which means madami nga yung coral, pero iisang klaseng coral lang yon. And we'll talk about this before this lecture ends. Okay. But ang point dito is don't just look at coral cover. Look at the variety of corals, especially if you're designating new marine protected areas and you are looking for reefs that are likely to resist human impact and recover from climate change. So if you use the new scales, we have category A, B, C, and D reefs, and many of them are found in 2 of our 6 biogeographic regions. Many of the richest reefs in terms of cover and diversity are in the Sulu Sea or in the West Philippine Sea. So nasa west side ng Philippines. The stratified random sampling scheme na dinescribe ko kanina also allowed us to come up with not just a national average, but also averages for specific bioregions. So, for example, if you are working in Eastern Mindanao, it does not make much sense to compare the cover in Eastern Mindanao which is this one, with that of reefs like Tubataha. Because notice that for some reason, yung average for Eastern Mindanao is much lower for both cover and diversity than the average for the Sulu Sea and West Philippine Sea bioregions. Okay. So we have a national average, but we also have averages for specific bioregions. Again, these bioregions are shown here. So West Philippine Sea, Sulu Sea, Celebes Sea, South Philippine Sea, North Philippine Sea, and the Visayas Sea. The labels are here. And some bioregions like this and this are richer than the ones on the east. Okay, so these are more useful because it allows you to explain your results to, for example, the local mayor or your regional executive director or your protected area superintendent. Because, for example, if you have a reef na nasa category A sa hard coral cover, that means that reef is in the top 9% of the reefs in the country. And if you have a category B reef, that means nasa top 25% siya ng reefs sa country. So it allows you to make a statement about how that reef compares to others in the country. And because the differences among the categories are smaller, not 25% jumps, we will also show you shortly na if you have a category D reef, hindi yan necessarily category D in a few years. In fact, it can become a C in 1 year, a B the year after that, an A a year after that. Okay. So this again makes this scale more realistic and more sensitive to show progress, for example, in management. Easier to explain to non-specialists as well. So talking about recovery, this is the fourth number that you should keep in mind. I should update this slide because this paper just got published. And so this is now Abisamis et al. 2022. Okay. So 7% is how much hard coral cover you can gain in a year in a reef that is fast recovering based on reef in Palawan that was monitored from 2011 to 2019. It was growing, changing coral cover at an average rate of 7% a year. And dito nanggaling yung sinabi ko earlier na your coral cover can go from D to C to B to A in as short a period as 4 or 5 years. Okay. That is how fast a reef can recover. And this is not without any restoration efforts. Okay. It's Nabat Reef in Taytay Bay in eastern Palawan. Notice now one of the reasons this reef is recovering so fast after the 2010 bleaching was because the cover of macroalgae, seaweeds, is very low. If the cover is very high, you will not get a recovery rate this fast. Okay. So, talking about macroalgae and talking about averages, so paano natin malalaman kung madami or konti ang seaweeds, ang macroalgae? Okay. Again, this is where these averages are coming useful. During the nationwide surveys, the average cover of macroalgae is almost 9%, 8.7 to be precise. So pag mataas pa dyan ang cover ng macroalgae, then that's likely too many for a reef. Okay. So this is also in Taytay Bay in eastern Palawan. And notice the algae cover was at the start more than 30%, sometimes got as high as 60%. And that is why the coral cover barely changed. Nakaabot siya sa category C for 2 years and went down again. Okay. The many studies, some recent ones show na pag nagkaroon ng bleaching sa isang reef, mas mataas ang mortality kung mataas ang seaweed cover. And what this paper is showing is it will also prevent recovery of coral cover. Okay, let me pause a second kasi parang na-disconnect yung aking isang machine. Habang naghahantay, maybe this is a good time to pause for questions while my presentation is attempting to reconnect. Meron ba kayong katanungan? Either lagay nyo sa chat box or please go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Sir Al.
Yes, go ahead. Hi, Tin.
In relation to the 7% po na parang recovery, no? So, what are the genera of these corals? I mean, what are the most common genera found in the area?
Okay, thank you for that. Very good question. In that reef, Nabat, the recovery was driven mostly by Acropora, okay, which is not surprising because they grow fast. And they also reproduce mostly by spawning. But yung sa Nabat, we suspect it's both sexual recruitment and regrowth that contributed to the fast recovery. Okay. However, and this is data that's still not published. Sa area ng marine station namin, we have one reef, clubhouse, and the dominant coral is not Acropora. Okay. The dominant coral is Porites or Porites. Okay. And it can still do 7%. Okay. Sa case ng ganong reef, it's not really sexual recruitment. What we show in that Abisamis paper is yung porheitis na mukhang patay actually still has tissues about 7 millimeters into the skeleton. And so it can grow back very quickly by just resheathing. Tinatakpan niya uli ng isang layer ng tissue yung skeleton na dating patay. Okay. And that's why ang bilis nag-change ng coral cover. Okay. The phenomenon is often referred to as the phoenix effect. Okay. First described for mushroom corals na mukhang patay, but is actually reproducing asexually. So thank you for that question. It's often fast-growing corals, but it doesn't have to be fast-growing corals.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, again, thank you for that question. By the way, for most of our reefs, Acropora and Porheitis are the two most common corals. Okay, so that 7% is something we can expect from many reefs, not just the one reef in Lian and the one reef in Taytay. Okay, connect na ako. So these are examples from Lian. Okay, and like I said, yung makikita nyo, this is still Taytay pala. This is Inner Bay, Outer Bay. This is Nabat. This is Lopez. And both are driven by Acropora. And notice, mababa yung seaweed cover. Pero kung mataas yung cover ng seaweed, there's almost no recovery or very slow, 1 to 2% recovery. Okay, this is Lian, okay, where we don't have a lot of Acropora. Okay, but notice this reef na at least as of the time this graph was made, this reef is still being monitored twice a year up to now. This reef, which is dominated by slow-growing Porheitis or Porheitis, is now category A, and even before bleaching of 2010, it was not category A. Okay. So it can still recover very quickly. Okay, so these are pictures from Taytay, that reef na we were showing na hindi nagre-recover. And you can see there's a lot of Padina, Lobophora, and in some reefs, even Caulerpa. Okay. And hindi ko na maalala. Well, one of the things that you should already be familiar with, but if not, please note this URL. This is the Allen Coral Atlas, legacy of Paul Allen, founder of Microsoft. And in the Allen Coral Atlas, you can now show maps where satellite images are processed to identify areas covered by coral and algae. Hindi ma-distinguish pa so far yung spectral signature nila. Pero you can now get maps like this, and yung newest feature nila is they can even show you turbidity gaano kalabo yung tubig every quarter over the last year or so. Okay. So a very useful tool showing you areas with coral, seaweed, and there's also geomorphology. Okay, now one of the things that was done with the nationwide survey of reefs is we tried to classify the different community types. Okay, and I wanted you to see how coral cover behaves, and that's why we encourage now you don't just use the hard coral cover scale. You must also look at the variety of coral. Okay. This analysis led to 7 community types, and I wanted to emphasize 3 of those community types. Type 1, which generally are in well-developed reefs, malalaki, matatandang reef. Usually, yung part ng reef na nakaharap sa habagat is where you will get type 1. And notice the average for a type 1 reef is slightly above national average. Type 2 reefs, okay, on the other hand, tend to be the reefs that are facing the northeast, the Amihan, northeast monsoon. And notice the coral cover in the northeast facing reefs, fringing reefs, are their average is lower than national average. Okay, 18 versus 26 versus the 22.8 na pinoint out ko kanina. A third type is type 3. Okay, often found in lagoons. For example, sa Pujada Bay, inside the bay, you have many reefs like this, dominated by branching varieties. Notice the average coral cover is quite high, 35.8. These are mostly inshore reefs protected from waves. The cover is high, but as I will show you, the diversity is low. So when we teach people, and that's what we'll do in the next lecture, when we teach people to design surveys for a given area, and or kung hindi malaking area yung isa-survey nyo, kung meron kayong isang MPA na kailangan nyong i-monitor, you have to recognize itong mga type 1, type 2, and type 3. Okay. Because in reefs like this, facing the habagat, you will likely see type 1. In embayments and areas protected from both monsoons, you should expect type 3. And the places that face the Amihan, you should expect the type 2. And why do you need to do that? Okay, let me show you why. Okay, so based on this generalization, based on this typology that I described, if you have an island, and let's pretend that island is circular in shape. Yung side na nakaharap sa southwest, sa habagat, you should expect a type 1. The side that faces the northeast, the Amihan, you should expect a type 2. Okay, lalo na if the island is shaped like this and oriented like this. Mas malaki yung type 1, mas malaki yung type 2. That means na if you apply the averages, you should expect na mas mataas yung cover dun sa southwest side compared to the northeast side. And if you have a type 3 that does not face the monsoons, that tend to be more wave sheltered, the cover will be even higher. Okay. So if you want to have a better sense of, like, survey kayo, you're interpreting survey data, you're trying to explain the survey data to the local mayor, to the DNR staff responsible for that reef. You have to keep in mind na the way the coral cover is distributed around our islands, they are not going to be homogeneous. Okay. So, and as important is now yung naka-highlight in yellow, that is diversity. Yung side na nakaharap sa southwest will still be higher than yung side nakaharap sa northeast. But more important, look at the richness. Okay, mali yung caption ko dito. This should be Taos. And notice, mas mababa pa yung diversity ng type 3. One of the things we suspect is happening based on some published studies is many of the protected areas appear to be chosen mainly on the basis of hard coral cover, if cover is considered. And that means na most likely ang pinoprotect ay type 3 reefs. And type 3 reefs have lower diversity kahit na mas mataas yung coral cover. And why is that bad? Okay. Well, kung ilan lang klase ng coral ang nandoon, kahit na madaming coral but konti yung variety, the small variety means that they are going to be susceptible to the same stressors. They will likely be all susceptible to bleaching kung tumaas ang temperature. And because many of these type 3 reef corals are branching, they are also going to be prone to typhoon impacts. Daanan yan ng bagyo, they will easily be broken by typhoon generated waves. And they are not likely to recover quickly. But that part is something we are working to document. But the point is, many areas that have high cover have low diversity. And so you need to plan your surveys correctly so that you can interpret the data better. And if you are being asked to evaluate the effectiveness of, for example, a specific marine protected area, especially if it's locally managed, you have to make sure that you're comparing type 3 against type 3 or 1 versus 1, but not 3 against 1. That's comparing apples and oranges. Okay. So this is why it's not enough na alam niyo yung averages. It's not enough na alam niyo kung anong scale ang gagamitin. It's also important for you to keep in mind certain things about how coral cover and diversity is distributed around islands, around bays, or around the waters of a town. Okay. So this is another of our newer work, and we're comparing cover across 3 locations. And like we do in our monitoring, for those who have gone through the CBRAC 1 training, when we monitor a location like these towns or Tubataha, we have sites in each of these locations, and each site has a pair of stations. And we will introduce or reintroduce stations to you shortly and in this training. But stations are usually 1 to 200 meters apart, sometimes 500 meters apart. Okay. In this figure, we're showing hard coral cover. And we show, for example, not surprising, some places in Tubataha have really high cover. Okay, like notice 5A here, coral cover is over 80% for some transects. Each dot is a 50-meter transect, and the red symbol is the average of the 5 50-meter transects. So, not surprising, medyo mataas ang cover sa Tubataha, but notice the same goes for Mabini. Lian, not bad in some places. These are varieties-dominated reefs, by the way. And not surprising, unfortunately, in Bolinao, we have reefs where coral cover is 0. Okay. Pero if you compare this figure, which is coral cover with diversity, okay, notice itong 5A sa Tubataha, ang taas ng cover. Okay, look at its diversity. It's lower than average. Okay, and if you look at the diversity of Tubataha, it's not high anymore. Notice the diversity in Lian is higher than Tubataha. Okay, which emphasizes na if you just look at cover, you will ignore Lian because the cover is not spectacular, except for some places. Okay, but unlike yung sa Tubataha, notice site 2 in Lian, taas ng cover, and the diversity remains high. Okay, unlike 5A in Tubataha, ang taas ng cover, ang baba ng diversity. And this is due to thermal effects, upwelling, that sort of thing. But for interpreting survey data, for surveys done by scientists, for surveys done by citizen scientists, you need to keep these numbers in mind to help interpret the data. But you must also keep in mind, and we will talk about this before the training is completed, pag nag-face-to-face na kayo, you also have to keep in mind na you need to know where in an island, in a bay, in a town, where do you do the survey? What do you use to compare a protected area with? Okay. Ano yung control site? Ano yung impact site? No. Those decisions are very important. And from CBRAC 1 pa lang tinuturo namin it's not just the methods that you use that is important in determining the quality or the utility of your data. You must also know where to make the measurements, where to do the surveys. So yung ituturo do sa training, yung citizen science methods, the Alwan methods that will be introduced to you. They still use the same station dimensions that we used in the National Assessment of Coral Reef Environments program. It's a station that's 75 meters in length and 25 meters in width. You can see people for scale. You will realize that this area is about the size of 4 basketball courts. There's a banca for scale on the left side. In the National Assessment of Coral Reef Environments, we sampled this station with 50 meter transects, 5 of them randomly deployed. So a total of 250 pictures, 1 by 1 meters yung footprint ng pictures. Dun sa citizen science methods, we use the same station, the same criteria, and therefore we can use the same scales, the same averages to interpret the data. Except na we use fewer pictures, 30, ideally 50, and we take those pictures in random places in the reef. Okay, and that's the focus of the training. For this part lang, yun nga, we wanted you to be exposed to how do you interpret survey data, and the answer to that is we use the new scales, but you have to think about saan nyo gagawin yung survey. Okay, so the methods will be introduced to you on site na, but this video is showing you how those pictures are taken. So these methods do not require the use of scuba. Even the deployment of the station does not require scuba anymore. That's one of our newer innovations. We try to emphasize the use of the scale because we want to empower the people that are part of these surveys to be able to interpret the data themselves, even without the presence of a scientist. Scientists is always useful in these surveys, but as we try to show in the lecture na I'm about to finish, we know enough about our reefs now na interpreting hard coral cover data is not as esoteric as it used to be. And if you have additional data on butterfly fishes and invertebrates, you can actually make more statements about ano yung nangyayari dun sa reef. We will explain these other tools like yung scorecard during the training itself. Okay, so these are examples of the pictures that are taken using that method. And we'll show you how to process these pictures, even if you do not have a computer and a projector sa survey area. Okay, so that's the first lecture. We can spend the rest of the time dealing with questions, but I think this is the first time that I managed to deliver that lecture in less than an hour. Meron ba kayong tanong, comments, clarifications? Yung part 2 will be given during the training itself. Meron bang tanong? Pwedeng chat box, pwede kayong mag-unmute. Habang nag-iisip kayo ng tanong, in the last training, somebody asked me, I think he works for DNR. Sabi niya, doesn't the use of the new scale just modifies our standard of what good reef is? I think that was the question. My answer is medyo mahaba, but it's a yes or no. One way I explain the new scale sa non-specialists ay if you, for example, are hiring flight stewards and you set your height requirement too high. If it's too high, baka walang mag-qualify. Wala kang ma-hire. Okay. Same with the old scale. If you keep expecting 100% live coral cover or even 75% live coral cover, well, wala kang mahahanap based on the NACR surveys. Okay. If you look at the category D naman, yung other end ng scale na pinopropose namin. Remember, ang category D ay got 22%. Yung NACR surveys, the average soft coral cover was 3.2%, which means na if you add the 22 with the 3.5, yung category D in terms of live coral cover is going to coincide with yung poor ng Gomez and Alcala scale. Okay, so our category D is equivalent to the poor of the old scale, but we don't like to use the word poor because studies have shown na a reef with even 10% coral cover is still accreting. It is still able to grow. It is still able to keep up with, for example, sea level rise in theory. So poor should not mean pwede nang sirain. And that's also why we stopped using the excellent, good, fair, poor terms, although we made the mistake of using those terms in our 2017 paper, but stopped using that in our 2019 paper. These articles I refer to, including the new ones, yung Reyes et al. 2022 and the Abisamis one, will give you copies during the training. So, questions, comments, clarifications?
Sir Al, just a clarification po.
Go ahead.
Yung I mean the site selection using the Alwan is still the same with the yung sa po with the CBRAC na tinuro niyo po sa amin before.
Yes, except na now we can use yung terminology ng type 1, type 2, type 3, and so on. By the way, yung type 1, type 2, type 3, the paper is now at minor revisions stage. So hopefully in a few months, it will come out in the journal Coral Reefs. So we have additional details coming out. Na-publish na yung recovery rates at malapit na ma-publish yung typology. But yes, it's still the same. We just learned to explain it better to non-scientists, to the people that we are training you to train. We are showing you in this training how you explain it to them.
Okay po.
But the answer is yes, it's still the same. So if wala nang tanong, we have an opportunity to interact again. And you can ask me in the subsequent lectures. You can also ask the trainers when you meet up in Mindanao. So unless there's administrative details to discuss, perhaps I can pause the recording now. Alexis, Rainy, Chat, you can take over perhaps.
Okay, thank you so